And if you look at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing.
I'm sorry, what? What are we talking about now? All right, Grampy, give me the keys. I'll take you to Walmart. Somebody get him a cart. Oh, he's good to go. He did great. I watched some CNN this morning, and it turns out he did pretty darn good. He's not going anywhere. Okay, he had a flub. Was that was CNN also? Yeah, he had one flub. It was a flub, and it was just one. As long as you only count to one, then that ought to work out just fine for you. Happy Friday to you, and welcome. Welcome back once again to the center of mirth and joy in the universe. Our humble radio broadcast, The Chris Plante Show, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden had a big event last night. It was here in Washington. I was last night on Newsmax. I actually anchored the 8 p.m. show instead of my normal 10 p.m. show. And so I was the Newsmax Bureau in Washington, was able to enjoy the Joe Biden press conference at the Washington, D.C. Convention Center where NATO had been convening. And nobody asked Joe Biden what I would have asked him. What does NATO stand for? I would ask him, what does NATO stand for? Because I honestly don't think he could answer that question. I think he'd get it wrong. I think he'd flub that too. But we have a news media that should be speaking Russian or Farsi or something because they're not a legitimate Western news media. They're a corrupt news media, corrupt individuals, personally corrupt. I assume their families are corrupt. They work for corrupt companies and collectively, and they always think collectively, goose-stepping together everywhere they go. They got together and said, oh, that wasn't that bad. That was pretty good. He should stay. The answer after last night to should I stay or should I go now was he should stay now. If he stays, there will be trouble. But if he goes, it will be double. And the Democrats are polling. They love to take polls, don't they? And that has nothing to do with Hunter Biden going to gentlemen's clubs. Those are different polls altogether. And the polls, they've taken polls to see if Kamala would do better. They've got now 18 Democrat members of Congress. The numbers continue to grow. 18 Democrat members of Congress, House, and Senate that have said it is time for Joe Biden to go. He can't stay. He must go. But Joe doesn't care, and more importantly, perhaps, Jill Biden doesn't go, and the smartest man that Joe Biden knows, the crackhead stripper knocker-upper, Hunter Biden with the Russian hookers and the video and the laptop that we were lied to about for so long. Hunter Biden, apparently an Oval Office advisor now to the President of the United States, and Hunter wants him to stay because if Trump were in the White House, Hunter Biden might be in all kinds of legal trouble. And we don't want that, do we? No, sir. The lots of fun last night. We were watching the debate, and actually the debate continued into the 8 p.m. hour. So I was sitting on the set, that's TV talk, sitting on the set and all wired up with the IFB and the microphone standing by, and had a lot of fun doing it actually last night, the 8 p.m. show on Newsmax, different than the show that I normally do, and a couple of members of Congress as guests, Sebastian Gorka as a guest on the television show last night. A couple of great exchanges there. It was wonderful. And I had a great time. And Joe Biden, I had a better night than Joe Biden did. I'd say, even if I only did okay, I had a much better night than Joe Biden did. He called, he said that his vice president is Trump. He said, Vice President Trump, his vice president, why do you think I chose her? Vice President Trump, very confused. That's okay. He referred to Volodymyr Zelensky, the very wealthy, very, very wealthy, very rich Ukrainian president. The Ukrainians funneled millions of dollars to the Biden family for nothing, but they're getting tens of billions back. So it was a very good investment. Their return on investment has been excellent. And the smartest man that Joe Biden knows, Hunter Biden, he made lots and lots of money there. But never mind that right now. He referred to Kamala Harris or whatever as Trump, as vice president. He said as Trump, and he called Trump she, that her or her. Why did he pick her as his vice president? And he's talking about Trump. And then he referred to Volodymyr Zelensky as Putin when he was introducing Volodymyr Zelensky because, what's the difference? Vladimir Lenin, Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky. One, Vlad the Impaler, is pretty much the same as the next. And he got all kinds of crazy stuff. He also referred to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his chief military advisor, the chief general in the United States military, a four-star general, who becomes the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he called him his commander-in-chief. Now, he's actually the commander-in-chief, but he's projecting his own title and his own capacity onto a four-star general who is the chief U.S. military officer in the United States and therefore the chief military advisor to the President of the United States. But he called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Commander-in-Chief, which you'd think he might catch that as it passed his lips that, hey, wait a minute, I'm the Commander-in-Chief. Who's claiming to be the Commander-in-Chief? Well, nobody is, sir. You just called somebody else the Commander-in-Chief, and you just said that Trump is your vice president, and you introduced Vladimir Putin at the NATO summit. Perhaps he'd like Vladimir Putin to be at the NATO summit because, they also got a bunch of money from the Russians, the Biden family did. It's good to be a Democrat because the news media then came out and said, no big deal, nothing to see here. This is, that's not a thing. Don't worry about that. So we've got Joe Biden and we've got the news media, and there are all kinds of other wacky stories too. I shared with you days ago a story out of Philadelphia where a young woman, an African-American woman, it matters, race matters because Democrats, but it does matter in the case of this story. African-American woman radio host that it was revealed about a week ago that when she did an interview with Joe Biden, the White House gave her a list of 8 questions from which she selected 4, asked Joe Biden those 4 questions. Joe Biden gave the canned answers. It's a radio interview, so he's got a script in front of him and nobody can see him reading from the script. And when this was discovered, the radio station, pretentiously pretending to be journalistically legitimate, fired the lady. And then they said, well, we just parted ways. So they lied about that too. They didn't fire her. They just parted ways. Maybe she voluntarily decided to leave. Oh, maybe it's time we parted ways and I had no more paycheck because I did what the Democrat Party wanted me to do in the White House. And it's the Soviet Union. It's a third world banana republic because lefties are everywhere. They're not democratic. They're not Democrats. They're leftists. They're the left. At least half of them are not smart enough to know the difference. And that's why they found jobs in the news media for the most part. So that's remarkable. But then we found out yesterday that another station, a radio station in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the Republican National Convention will be held next week, another radio station, they interviewed Joe Biden, and the White House asked them to, and another African-American host, and they haven't parted ways yet, but a radio station in Milwaukee says it agreed to edit interview with Joe Biden, and they edited out in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. They've got the story, and it looks like journalism there at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and it's remarkable stuff, and they edited out. The White House said, well, when he said this stuff that he's got more black people in his cabinet and his administration than any administration in history, that's not true. So could we just edit that out? So they edited out the gaffes because Sieg Heil, meine Schatzi, throw in a little German, but really it's more Soviet. Well, it could be like the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels too. But the Democratic Party isn't, all right? Friendly fire isn't. Common courtesy isn't. Social media isn't. And President Biden isn't. You got to keep adding to that list of isn'ts. Pretty remarkable stuff. Yeah, so this Milwaukee station now edited the interview after the Biden campaign said, hey, can you just cut this out and cut that out before you air it? And now they're getting ready to sit down on Monday with Lester Holt at NBC Fake News to do a pre-taped interview that they're going to air in prime time up against, as counter-programming, up against the Republican National Convention being held, coincidentally, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But why would that be a problem? And there's another radio station as well that took questions from the White House because our media is the most corrupt institution in America. How many times do I have to say it? The remarkable collaboration, the collusion, I think is the right word, the collusion between the news media and the Democrat Party, the Biden White House, the Biden campaign. It was true during the Obama presidency, the Obama campaign, and we have an incredibly corrupt media. Without the media, the Democrats could never win an election anywhere. The media is the campaign. Joe Biden never left his basement 4 years ago, and the media was his campaign. We talked about it at the time. We've been telling the truth here for as long as you've been listening and as long as I've been doing radio. That's the whole point, is the truth about Democrats, about Republicans, about the news media, about everything, about Vlad the Impaler Putin, who's a communist, although the New York Times called him a conservative because he's a villain and they have to villainize all conservatives. Remarkable stuff. Biden introduces Ukraine Zelensky as President Putin in latest brutal gaffe. But that's the New York Post, right? Joe Biden laughs off mixing up Zelensky and Putin. Oh, and then when he straightened it out as he was walking away from the podium after he introduced Zelensky as Putin, he realized that he had made a mistake, and he turned around and he came back, and then he introduced him as Alinsky, like he's Saul Alinsky, like they got the radical left-wing rules for radicals, Obama and Hillary Clinton icon, Saul Alinsky, the radical leftist anti-American. But he did, I didn't hear a Z in there. It sounded like he introduced him as Saul Alinsky after he got it straight. And then Saul Alinsky, Volodymyr Zelensky, he came up and tried to relieve the pressure a little bit. I am better than him. Yeah, you're not quite as rich as him, but you're working on it. It's our money. Don't worry about it. And just as corrupt as this country has ever been, honestly, at least since electricity. Amazing stuff. And Biden calls Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. I think that's the wrong headline from left-wing media. No, he called Trump his vice president. That's what he did. But they even lie in the headlines because they've got the power to abuse, and therefore they abuse it. In the meantime, Biden will get on Air Force One today and go to Michigan, which is a hotbed of jihadism, and the Democrats love jihad. They hate the Jews. Why do they hate the Jews? It's kind of a strange thing. And they have meetings with Democrat Jews who say, oh, yes, we hate the Jews too. Yeah, really the bad guy is Netanyahu because he loves Israel from the river to the sea, as the Democrat Party says. Remarkable stuff. So Biden heading to Michigan for rally after high-stakes news conference. The Washington Post performing an act of journalistic gratification upon Joe Biden after last night's fiasco. And it was a fiasco, but it wasn't enough of a fiasco for Joe Biden to be squeezed out like the thing that he is. I'll try to keep it clean. There's a funny meme going around that somebody shared it with me, and then I started sharing it with people immediately. MAGA Tony tweeted out a funny thing. It's a photograph of Kamala Harris shaking hands uncomfortably with Volodymyr Zelensky, or as Joe Biden likes to call him, Vladimir Putin, and they're standing in front of the American flag and the Ukrainian flag, and the Ukrainian flag is right side up because somebody was brought in to do it. But it's Kamala shaking hands with Volodymyr Zelensky, and the caption is, Vice President Trump meeting President Putin. But he did real good, real good. They treat him like a child, like a problem child, a troubled child, like he's the bad seed. like he's Billy Mummy in The Twilight Zone, and he'll turn them into an ear of corn, put them in the cornfield if they don't obey. Remarkable stuff. Yeah, and the Biden campaign, talking about the brain trust they have, a 3-person brain trust behind Joe Biden. Wait till you hear who the 3 people are. It'll be very inspiring, I'm sure. And CNN now admits Joe Biden's entire presidency has been a carefully staged sham. They didn't mean to. It was kind of an accident. We got that. We live in very corrupt times. We have very corrupt government. Only the news media is more corrupt than that. We've also got President Trump, the United Auto Workers. They call them workers. And the drumbeat grows louder. AOC in trouble with the Socialist Party that got her where she is. And we are at 888-630-9625. Bum, 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 bum. And then there was the number of times that Biden said anyway last night. We have a little montage of that for you. But when you're a Democrat, you know, you could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and you wouldn't lose a single vote in the news media. Let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Jeff calling from Hagerstown, Maryland. Jeffrey, you were on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Thank
Jeff.
you for letting me lead off this morning. So the cabinet members in attendance last night, they had the look on their face like Biden was giving his own eulogy. I mean, pretty rough. And I'd like, I was on with Larry, but I didn't get my call in, and he was wondering what kind of grade you would gave Biden last night. I got to thinking, and if you recall in the movie Animal House, when everybody was in front of Dean Wormer, and Dean Wormer said, Mr. Blutarski, 0.0, and he had the pencil stuck in his nostrils.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got like Mr. Biden, 0.0, and the camera goes to Joe, and he's got his thumb in his mouth with his banky, and so I thought of that one there. So
yeah,
anyway,
yes.
Yeah. No. I just wanted to let you go, and I'll listen.
I still have Dean Vernon Wormer in my head here, and with 0.0, fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, because that was the next line from Dean Vernon Wormer to Senator Blutarski.
0.0.
People have become so cynical. Isn't that true? Anyway, I think it's important to be skeptical, but not as good, not as wholesome to be cynical. It's complicated. Not really very complicated. But let's get to Lunch Bucket Joe yesterday, because this guy, he doesn't know much about much, that's for sure. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the chief military officer in the United States of America. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, General Charles Q. Brown, who's an Air Force general. And that makes General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., who I'm sure is a very fine man and not transgender, probably very normal. And he's the chief military advisor to the President of the United States, who unbelievably is Joe Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden, Corn Pop's buddy. And last night, well, I'll get to that. Give me a moment, because I want to get to that in a moment. He got that wrong. He got Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin wrong. He got Donald Trump and Kamala Harris wrong. Let us start with because these are gaffes, to be generous, of historic proportion, uttered by a dim-witted. Did you see this guy tweeting out? Some guy tweeting out yesterday. Somebody shared it with me that Joe Biden's brain. I think it says he's a broke. I've got it here. in an Italian accent. It made me laugh, I've got to say. Somebody named Derek, Derek like Derek and the Dominoes on Twitter. Joe Biden stuns audience speaking an Italian accent, says, my brain, she is not so good. That's somebody tweeted there. Like, hey, Derek, this is how it goes. She's a broke. She's a no good. It goes like that. But Derek tweeted that out yesterday. It made me laugh. That's funny. Now let's get back to Lunch Bucket Joe for a minute, because at the NATO summit, I went downtown. I got trapped in traffic by a police officer. Well, not by a police officer, by a police barricade on 14th Street last night, making my way to Newsmax headquarters in Washington to do the big television show. And total barricade. Motorcades going this way, motorcades going that way, literally going in both directions within minutes of each other. The Turkish, whoever, representative, the motorcade, and maybe the ambassador, maybe who knows. And I got stuck, and it was clear I was going to be late, and I had to get out of my car. I kind of pulled into the middle lane, the left turn lane, and I pulled up, and a police officer, a woman, D.C. Metropolitan Police, was yelling at me and shaking her fist at me and shouting and scowling and yelling and like, you don't do that, you don't do it. And I put it in park, and I got out of my car, and I walked over and I talked to the nice lady, and I apologized for being in a rush and for seeming like one of these Washington people and stuff. And I called her ma'am, and she said, then she got real nice. I was like, 2 minutes. And I gave her a snappy salute when I walked back to my car. I said, thank you. And then she stopped traffic and let me through, and only me. And just my car. I was like, thank you. That's very nice. That's very, very nice of you. And then I got there on time, just barely, just in the nick of time. It was kind of a fun moment, actually. All right, now back to Joe Biden. Enough about me. Let's go to, but she was very nice, and I don't know her name. And if I did, I wouldn't use it because it'd probably get her in trouble for being nice. But it was a very nice moment. I want to thank the D.C. Metropolitan Police lady for being so nice. And I was being nice, and I was apologizing because I was rushing through, and I wanted to drive through the middle of a couple of motorcades. I had to get there, But in any case, here is Joe Biden last night at the NATO summit. This is before the press conference, before he came out and babbled and rambled, turned it into a political speech all about Trump and how great he is as president. I'm like, I thought this was a NATO summit. What are you talking about, rambling Joe? But this is before all of that, before the press conference and all that. And here comes Volodymyr Zelensky, who's not a member of NATO, and he introduces him as Vlad the Impaler.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
I'm so focused on beating Putin. Years later, no peace talks, no nothing. And he rambled about that for some period of time, about hundreds of thousands of Russians being killed, and there's no peace deal. There's no peace negotiation. Our chief diplomat, Antony Blinken, who was sitting there in the front row last night, and no peace talks going on. But in any case, so I'm so focused on beating Putin. No, it's the war that will never end. It's the military-industrial complex war, and Joe Biden is their boy. We had a listener call in a little while ago and say, Joe Biden called him Putin, then turned away from the podium and started to walk away. Then he turned back and said, whoa, boo, what am I talking about? I'm so focused on beating Putin. He thinks he's running against Putin. I should have asked him about that at the press conference last night, too. But one of our listeners called in and said, it's not like he realized when he walked away. He's got a little micro earpiece in, and one of his hacks squawked in his ear, "You just called him Putin." And I didn't see an earpiece, but you can't rule anything out because they got these little tiny, you see them on TV commercials, these little hearing aids. And you can put one of those in Joe's ear and feed him actual thoughts, actual facts. There were a lot of questions that were not asked last night by our fraudulent, corrupt press. And let me say that They didn't call on James Rosen, right, from Newsmax. They didn't call on Peter Doocy from Fox News. They didn't call on anybody that might ask an actual question. And there's another little ditty here, and I don't know exactly how this panned out, but Todd Stearns of Newsmax TV and Newsmax Radio, Todd Stearns tweeted out last night at 5:37 p.m., just in, he wrote on a tweet, Newsmax reporters will not be allowed in the room for Biden's news conference. Our correspondent, Alana Austin, breaking that news just moments ago on my Newsmax show. Now, I don't know whether that was ironed out. That's 5:30. The press conference, Joe Biden press conference, was scheduled for 5:30. And then they moved it to 6:30. And then they said it might be 7. And then they said it might be 7:30. And indeed, it started at, I believe, 7:28. The 5:30 p.m. press conference started just shy of 2 hours late because Joe Biden had to take a nap and watch an episode of Hazel. He loves that Shirley Booth. Remarkable stuff. And I was watching it there at Newsmax and taking notes and having a good time and laughing and making fun of him. Now, the big boy presser, Joe Biden was asked about the mix-up, right, about his broken brain. And he says, oh, that's no problem. That happens all the time. I fixed it.
I wanted to ask you about your, you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now
that's
have
hilarious.
Your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, the German Chancellor, having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing in my leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end.
You weren't talking about
I
Putin.
said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names.
And then I added, no, you didn't add 5 other names. No, we just played the soundbite. You didn't add 5. He doesn't remember what happened just moments earlier. His brain, she's a broke, she's a no good. That brain of his. I don't know who the reporter was. I think it might have been an AFP reporter, but I'm not certain. Agence France Presse, a wire service. But that was an actual question from a reporter who will never go anywhere in this business because, you know, oh yeah, and then he makes up stuff immediately about 5 other names, and he had been talking about Putin, and then he mixed it up. No, that's not what happened. Then Joe Biden was asked about his brilliant vice president, Kamala Harris. And you'll never guess what Joe Biden said.
What concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
She?
So let's start there.
Yeah. He wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president if he didn't think she, and that's all fine. I saw on CNN this morning on MSNBC that that's okay, that's just fine, because the most corrupt institution in the United States of America is the American news media. They are Democrat Party front groups, front boys, front girls, some in between, cross-dressing, but clearly Democrats, any way you slice it, a disgrace to Western civilization. Our republic cannot function with a fourth estate as corrupt as is our fourth estate. It is crucial in a free society, in a constitutional republic, the brilliant founders of our great nation and framers of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the brilliant First Amendment, relies on a free and fair press, and it also relies on an honest and moral press. And that's where the breakdown comes in. That's the breakdown right there. They all cheat on their wives. They cheat on their husbands. Even the women cheat on their wives, and the men cheat on their husbands. It's everybody cheats on everybody, and they lie and they cheat and they deceive. It's perfectly normal. But his vice president is Donald Trump, and she is qualified, Mrs. Trump, maybe Ms. Trump. Sorry, because Democrats, you know how they are. Just amazing stuff. Vice President Trump. And then asked, well, gosh, what if Kamala Harris were doing better in the polls than you and would be more likely to beat Trump? Because I CNN this morning, a woman talking about Trump winning on the panel there in the studio said it was terror or terrifying, the terrifying prospect of Trump winning. He was already president for 4 years. The worst thing was a few tweets, I think. And he made fun of you guys. You guys need to develop a thicker skin and a more capable brain collectively. Joe Biden on Kamala Harris polling better than him.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win.
There's no way you can win.
Me.
You.
No one's saying that.
Uh-oh, creepy.
No poll says that.
Creepy boy whisper. No poll says it. There's a, the poll the other day said that Hillary Clinton has a better chance of beating Donald Trump than does, I think Hillary Clinton commissioned and paid for the poll, probably with Russian money, more collusion. But the poll said that Hillary Clinton had a better chance of beating Donald Trump than Joe Biden. And the poll also said that Hillary Clinton has a better chance of beating Donald Trump than Kamala Harris. They lie about it. And that creepy whisper, that's like, Peter Lorre in the Fritz Lang film M being a creepy child stalker. Man, I'm telling you, that whisper campaign is pretty creepy stuff. And then he apparently thinks that during the debate where he didn't do very well, I've heard in the media he didn't do very well. And he thinks maybe during the debate he made one mistake. We're not sure what that was.
And if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign in the debate.
I mean, doing it?
I mean, my schedule has been full bore.
Really? So your wife is campaigning for you. You've been asleep at the wheel. You can't be serious going around saying things like that. And now, here comes, he calls the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff the commander-in-chief. He's the commander-in-chief.
Our military is work. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military.
He meant to say the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, the Joint Chiefs of Staff made up of the top generals and admirals and commandants, the United States military services, the chief of staff of the Army, the chief of naval operations, chief of staff of the Air Force, the Marine Corps commandant, the Coast Guard commandant. Oh, and they got Space Force now too, Space Force. And then there's the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the vice chairman, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the top four-star, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his chief military advisor, but he doesn't know what the title is. He thinks, now he's the commander-in-chief, and all of this is fine. This is great. Although it looks like maybe Pelosi and Obama, Barack Obama, not Big Mike, but maybe Big Mike too. Barack Obama, they are waging a secret, surreptitious campaign to undermine Joe Biden and drive him out. That's Game of Thrones stuff. Now, the scuttlebutt today in Washington, D.C. is that the next 48 hours will be crucial. Such drama out of Washington. It's a very dramatic television show. The next 48 hours, because Obama is behind a curtain with a knife, and Hillary's over there with a blow dart gun, and Pelosi is undermining him quietly. And if James Clyburn turns, then Joe Biden will have to get into a tub and open a vein like Frankie Five Angels. Let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Bob, calling from Harwood, Maryland. Oh, Bob, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Oh, thank you for taking my call, Chris.
You bet.
Yeah, reluctantly, I listened to the press conference last night of the president, and when he got the question on the October 7th massacre in Israel and the conflict between Israel and Hamas, in his answer, he never once mentioned our hostages. And not only all the hostages, but 5 American hostages. And I just wonder about our news media, the liberal media, that has not been noticed by anyone, that he didn't include that in his answer. And if you recall, back in 1979 with President Carter, I mean, that was basically one of the foundational underpinnings of his non-election, was how he dealt with that. And nationally, we were all spun up over it. Matter of fact, Ted Koppel, the whole late night news scenario started because of a hostage crisis.
That's right.
So it's just extremely disappointing to me that it wasn't mentioned, and no one is holding him in account for that.
I can explain that, I think, Bob, and that is today's left has no regard for human life. And I mean that. That's from abortion to American hostages being held. And you're right, Nightline started because of that, and Ted Koppel, and day 444, America held hostage. That was the last day, Dave.
Absolutely.
That was Inauguration Day. Ronald Reagan was sworn in, and the Iranians let the last of the hostages go. And as you pointed out, Bob, there are 5 remaining hostages being held by the troglodytes of Hamas that we know are still alive, or we believe to still be alive. They're being tortured, they're being raped, they're being used as slaves. No mention